welcome to Crying While Driving.
Whoa, this is unreal.
My project partner. Cheers.
Cheers.
We're doing this.
We're doing this. That is so good. I get my own special cocktail. I feel very honored.
You're the brains behind the machine.
I am not.
You get everything special, anything you want.
Wow. I feel like we should introduce our very special guest today, who normally won't be here.
Because she's a pig.
Because she's a literal pig. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to let her speak?
So this is my dog, Sadie. And what you're hearing is exactly why. She's usually at home, sleeping, and not here.
Or outside in quarantine.
Or outside in quarantine. And she does things like rub her face against the table.
Anything and everything.
Yeah. But today she'll be here, and she would like to try the cocktail.
Gigi jumped ship. You want to come down? You want to come sit with us? It's her bedtime.
All right, so now that we got the intros out of the way, I have some questions for you, Lyndsey Conway.
Ask away, Andrea.
So why did you want to start this podcast?
Why did I want to start it? Well, I have always wanted to get into content creation, but I wasn't sure exactly what my niche would be. And I moved into this travel trailer that we're shooting in last summer. And I wanted to do something with it. I live in it full time with my 3 animals, and it can be super challenging and a little crazy and hectic.
All right. So you wanted to do content creation with your camper. Why content creation? And like specifically, why a podcast? Like, how'd you land on a podcast? Were there other podcasts that you were watching that like you found to be influential or anything like that?
So I think that we sort of landed on the podcast thing together. That was not the plan initially. Well, the plan, first of all, when I started dreaming of living in a camper, I was working remotely and had been for a few years. So the idea was to get on the road and not be in one place. But life just happens, and here we are. It is, what's the word? Not sedentary. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm not moving from this location.
Yeah, it's stationary.
Stationary. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, we're stationary.
We're stationary.
That was not the plan, but here we are. So if that's, that's the situation, I wanted to be doing something with the space.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about why you're stationary right now and not on the road?
No,
okay,
I don't.
That's fine. That's totally fine. That's a fair answer.
But I think that we sort of landed on the podcast thing together. My initial idea was YouTube, which we will be posting to.
Yeah.
But I think that I had a bunch of ideas out of the gate, and we've sort of honed in on this one concept to start with, which is just having a conversation with another queer person and letting them tell their story, giving them a platform.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are a few podcasts that I listen to regularly that have really helped me put some pieces together for myself. So if anybody that shares their story can do that for somebody else, that is the mission.
What are some of your podcasts that you listen to that you found inspiring?
Sure. So when I was first sort of figuring out that I am a lesbian and never wanted to date a man again, I was listening to a lot of We Can Do Hard Things by Glennon Doyle. I read her book, and then I listened to a few of her wife's books, which are fantastic. Have you read anything?
No,
Do you know Abby Wambach, her wife, the soccer star?
No.
Well, fantastic. I listened to her podcast every day for probably a year. And then this summer I got really into X's and O's by Shannon Beveridge. You turned me on to the lesbian drama surrounding Fletcher.
Right.
Yeah, and once I went down that rabbit hole, I didn't come back. And here we are.
And here we are. I like the idea of the podcast. I like the technical aspects behind like running a podcast, but like why specifically around queer conversations? What landed you on that? Do you remember?
Yeah, I'm still becoming comfortable myself sharing my story and just talking about those parts of myself. And this is a space for me to become more comfortable with that, just as much as I want everybody who comes in to be comfortable and feel safe to share their story. As much as I think we're giving, a voice and a platform to other people, it's really helping me.
Yeah. No, I've loved every episode I've listened to. I think what you're doing is going to help a lot of people. I really do. I can't wait for this to get out there.
Why did you want to help?
I liked all things tech. I mean, I wanted to support you, and I think you had a great idea. And I don't know, it's just like you had a vision for something, and I knew that the way that I could support you the best is just to run the technical part of it.
You're doing a great job.
Well,
thank you so much.
We've run into some technical issues.
We have. Do you want to talk through some of the trials and tribulations we've experienced?
Sure, if it'll help anybody else.
Yeah.
So my day job is technical, but it's like writing code. So it's not really anything AV or anything like what we're doing with the podcast. Mm-hmm. But I also found that to be fulfilling for me, is like learning the technical aspects behind something like this. Mm-hmm. So our first idea for mics was the Blue Yeti, which we thought, hey, like there's so many content creators using the Blue Yeti.
That's
right?
what was recommended to us.
Yeah. Like your friend who's into like audio,
who records audiobooks. Yeah.
Oh,
we reached out to him initially. Yeah, and he recommended the Blue Yeti. So
yeah, so we got one Blue Yeti, and we set it on the table, and we set it between you and Jordan. Mm-hmm. And I actually wasn't here for that episode, mm-hmm. right? And so, but that Blue Yeti was between you guys, and we had a different camera set up. Mm-hmm. That's more for like taking photos. I'll put it here. It's a Fujifilm something, and it kept turning off. I think it probably had like a 25-minute like record.
Well, I also didn't have it set to 4K, and it recorded 25 minutes out of focus.
Right, out of focus. Yeah, that'll happen.
But the audio was pretty good that we got from the Blue Yeti. The issues we ran into were Cooper panting and a lot of table tapping.
That's when I learned the difference between a condenser microphone and like there's two different kinds of microphones.
Is this a condenser mic?
This is a dynamic mic or something like that. There's two different kinds of mics, and like the Blue Yeti is a kind of mic that will pick up a lot of like background noise. And the fact that we set it on the table as well meant that it would pick up any sound of like tapping or anybody touching the table. Mm-hmm. It would just pick up that, and it would be really loud and would cut into your voices. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that the Blue Yeti, even in interview mode, won't record two channels. Mm-hmm. It will bring both of your voices into one file, and so it was really hard to in post like bring the volume of your voice up, because you have a much softer voice than Jordan. So then we thought, hey, what's better than one Blue Yeti?
Two.
And who was the next person we brought on? Was that Nikki? Okay, so then we knew, hey, we need a better.
This is a great system.
Oh yeah, I was so happy. I was like, yeah, this is gonna work. And then we got a better camera, which is this camera we're shooting on now, which is the Sony ZV-E10. I did a lot of research into finding a camera that will record for like 2 hours, or at least like as long as we needed for the podcast. So that's why we have this camera now, which is really a lot better. Like just visually, it looks a lot better than the Fujifilm, which is more for like photos. So the visual for Nikki's was great.
Outstanding.
So good. Mm-hmm. But again, with like the two different types of mics, we had so much mic bleed from the two Yetis. And we would have maybe picked up on that if you guys were wearing headsets, but that's not the look that we want for the podcast. Like that just feels like we're not having a conversation. That feels like tech in the weeds, like more like it's a different vibe.
This is a very small space, and when you add the mics and the lights and the pets and the other equipment, it just starts to feel overwhelming. We don't need to add headphones on top of that.
I agree. I think it would really take away from like us just having a conversation. Yeah. So after we listened to that audio back, and we were using OBS too. So OBS is open broadcast software, which I used when I was working at the TTC at Bridgewater State. And we use that like in classrooms to do some technical stuff. And what it does is it brings in the visual information and the audio information and records them both at the same time. And it was on the computer. So we had the camera plugged into the computer, the mics plugged into the computer, and that software was just taking all that and recording it all as one. And we thought, hey, we wanted to do this in case we wanted to like live stream someday or whatever. We already learned that software. But when we listened to it back, we had so much mic bleed, it was impossible. And maybe we could have done something with it if it recorded the 2 tracks, but it didn't. I didn't set up OBS properly, and that was just garbage audio. But luckily...
We had a fail-safe.
Yep. And that's when we learned about fail-safes. So, like, anybody doing anything remotely like this in the future, always have backups. Like...
Yeah, that's what we did for Jordan's also. We had, well, that's the only reason we have any visuals, because we were also recording it on my phone.
Yeah.
So, which we did for Nikki, and then we ended up swiping that audio.
Yes, exactly. So you were also recording on your phone, and so we took the audio from your phone and just like overlaid it over the very nice visual from this camera. And so we got something. Okay. Step to the worst episode. Like, I feel like we took a step back with Lexi's. Unfortunately,
that was heartbreaking.
It was really heartbreaking. It was.
So you found this. We put the Yetis aside.
Yeah.
And you found this whole new system.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, Yetis are not the way to go. The way to go is this type of microphone, and I learned about the Rodecaster, which would record 2 channels. If you like, we have the Rodecaster 1, not the Rodecaster 2. We didn't need the Rodecaster 2. So the Rodecaster 1 would record 2 channels if you like update the firmware, which I did. And it also allows me to like listen in and adjust the gain like on the fly. And also like we learned about like XLR cables and how that is superior instead of like USBs. And then we got the boom arms, which allowed us to touch the table without ruining the audio. And because we don't want to be like, hey, guests, don't touch the table. Don't do this. Like,
we also
don't do
have
that.
a dog that runs back and forth and a cat that, like, all kinds of crazy things happen on this table. So.
Right. So these are directional, which means that it's very, it's a lot less likely that there'll be mic bleed because it's only picking up the audio here. It's not like, I guess, like picking it up anywhere else. And so these will feed into the Rodecaster. And then what we did for Lexi's was I had headphones plugged into the Rodecaster. And I was listening into this episode, and I was like, oh, man, this is so awesome. This is so great. And I made the mistake of not pressing record on the phone. So for some reason, the Rodecaster's audio got very distorted.
Well, because of the cable running from the camera into the Rodecaster.
That's right. So we were still using the OBS studio where we had the camera plugged into OBS, these mics plugged into the Rodecaster plugged into OBS.
Never do that.
Don't do that.
It's too much interference.
It's like, I wouldn't do it.
The whole thing was unusable.
The whole thing was unusable. And
poor Lexi, who's coming back.
Yeah, and it's so unfortunate because that episode was so great. I really enjoyed listening to it. She had some really solid things to say that I felt like would have been really beneficial for the queer community to hear. But she'll be back.
She'll be back.
So the problem was, what I just want to talk about, like, the audio was distorted. It was completely unusable. It was like garbly, like nothing I've ever heard before. Yeah. I've never heard anything like that before. But it sounded crystal clear through the headphones. And that's how we missed it. And we've had like a learning experience from that too. So we used a USB-C cable from the Rodecaster to the computer, and we discovered that that was the problem. We did all our checks beforehand. We checked and recorded on just the Rodecaster, and then we recorded just on the camera. The problem was we didn't record it all together, and it was just that link. Mm-hmm. That link is what broke it and what caused the distortion. We figured out that was the factor that caused that. And the other thing we learned was to stop and play stuff back. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, that's why the intros sometimes will be like, there'll be a cut right after the intro. What we're doing is just watching back the footage to make sure that the audio
happens again.
That never happens again. The audio's good, the visual's good, and it's an opportunity for the guests to see themselves and say, "Oh, I really don't like my hair," or "Oh, let me adjust my shirt,"
or the light,
whatever. The light, yeah, exactly. Like today, we watched it back and you discovered you didn't like that light, mm-hmm. and that was a really good catch, mm-hmm. and that's something that we can learn from watching stuff back. Mm-hmm. So, always have plan B, maybe plan C. Now we have so many fail safes.
Mm-hmm. Now we have 2 phones going.
Yeah.
The camera, your GoPro is going today.
Yeah, it was for the interview, yeah. Yep. Yeah, 2 phones, the GoPro, the camera's recording separately. So now the tech is, the camera itself is recording, and it's recording sound and it's recording visual onto the SD card, mm-hmm. totally separate from anything else. Mm-hmm. The Rodecaster is recording to its SD card, totally separate from everything else. And in post is when we sync those things up and make sure that the good audio from these mics makes it back onto the good visual from this camera.
We're recording audio in 4 different places.
That's correct. We've learned. A sip of this.
I just want to sit here and listen to you talk.
No, stop. Why did you decide to move into a camper?
So I left my lifelong career in January of 2020 and started working remotely. And it got on my radar that people were doing this. People were living in rigs full time, paying off their student debt, lowering their cost of living. And that was very appealing to me. And after a few years of working remotely and downsizing my space, it just made sense. I was single for the most part. I don't have any kids. It was sort of like now or never. And the idea of tiny living was super appealing. I had been living in a dorm or an apartment since I was 18. I was burnt out on apartment life. I was burnt out on having a landlord. I grew up in Massachusetts. I lived in Rhode Island for a little over a decade. I don't necessarily want to settle in this area. I don't know where I want to be. What better way to figure that out than to travel with your little house?
Yeah. And how'd you find a permanent space for your camper?
Yeah, so it was serendipitous. I ended up getting laid off in January of 2023. I spent the better part of that year looking for a job and couldn't find one. And a very close family friend needed a nanny. She really needed somebody, and it sort of a more dynamic situation than just that we can get into a different time. But she needed somebody, and I really needed a place to park this. And the logistics of her situation, it just really benefited her for me to be here on the property as sort of a live-in nanny, but not exactly. We're still like very boundaried. Really lucky to have found this spot.
Yeah. I mean, the relationship that you have with her is great.
She's family. She's like a pseudo mom.
Yeah, you have really strong boundaries and clear boundaries, and it benefits you both. Like, it's a win-win.
Yeah. She's the boundary setting queen. She could teach a master class.
It's amazing. And she's such a kind woman too.
I'm very lucky.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges of living in a space like this?
Yeah. Well, I did not grow up a camping person. I always wanted to be a camping person. This was also a great test of that. Some of the challenges of this space, oh my gosh. So the nature of this sort of vehicle, it is a vehicle, something is always breaking, even if you're not towing it. This living space is not meant to be lived in full time. So managing electrical, like the fridge is giving me issues right now, learning the propane system, learning about the tanks. I've sort of honed in, as you know, I have my own systems in place now, but it definitely took a few seasons of living in it to streamline all of those processes.
Yeah. Did any of the challenges of living in this space, is it like, can you generalize that to your daily life outside of living in
Sure.
the
Well,
camper?
there's a whole host of challenges just being in the Northeast. For example, so I moved into this rig in June 2023 in the summer. In the summer months, I have the AC going, which keeps the air pretty dry in here. So what I ran into last winter, we're in the Northeast. It gets really, really cold. Obviously, campers are not insulated like a house would be. It's more akin to a styrofoam cup. So keeping the camper warm enough to live in with the temperature outside creates a lot of moisture, which creates mold. So one thing that I have done to mitigate like safety concerns like that is like taking off most of the doors and having curtains up so my clothes can breathe. So I've like put more insulation inside all of the closets. Everything, before I painted anything, pretty much every surface in here is covered in a layer of marine grade mold and mildew resistant primer. So yeah, mold was one of the biggest, like scariest issues I dealt with. And then after that, like there's just all kinds of things seasonally. We're in the Northeast. I don't want to worry about my pipes freezing. So like I don't keep water in my tanks. I have a 5-gallon water jug that I put an electric tap in. We have a little jug like that in the bathroom with a tap in there. Just like little things that you don't think about, like brushing your teeth, running the faucet. Like every little thing you do in a camper is just a little bit more complicated than it would be in an apartment or a house.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like cramped, or do you feel like it's the perfect amount of space? Do you feel happy that you got, how many square feet is it?
So it's a 24-foot rig. That's including the hitch. Internal walking space, it's probably like 30 square feet of like walking space. Livable, I don't know, what do you think the square footage is inside? Like 100? 130?
Yeah, I would say something around that, like 100.
It's so cramped. I mean, if I didn't have 3 pets, I think that would be a very different story. I think it's also challenging I had a huge 1-bedroom apartment, to go from that to basically a room to then a camper. It was a 4-year process or 3-year process of paring down my belongings, and I still have a storage unit.
Why this camper?
This was actually the first camper I looked at, and it was perfect. I have a ton of closet space. My background is cooking and culinary stuff, restaurant stuff, so it was really important to me to have as big of a fridge as possible, fridge and freezer setup. I have an oven. I have 3 burners on the range. Not that I use them very often, but it was the kitchen and the storage space was the most important thing to me.
You made me dinner once.
We have made several meals in here. Gets complicated when you're, dealing with the dishes, but it's possible.
Lyndsey's a very good cook.
You're generous.
But why such a small trailer, I guess what I was trying to say.
Oh, so yeah. Well, before I was parked where I am now, I was in my parents' driveway. So we decided on like the max amount of space that I could take up. And so we agreed around like 22.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. And then it's an ultralight, so you can use like a Ford F-150.
That's the other benefit. Yeah. So this is an ultralight. So you could even pull it with an SUV.
Whoa, an SUV?
Mm-hmm.
As long as it's like 8 cylinders or something.
Sure.
Ruins the transmission, I heard.
Well, you don't necessarily want to, but you could.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Gotcha.
But yeah, it's like a 1-ton truck. I think like a 150 is what you could pull it with.
Gotcha. Neither of us know very much about cars. Okay, so do you want to talk a little bit about your relationship to queerness and like how you... Do you want to tease us a little bit before we have like an entire episode on your queerness?
Yeah. Can you ask me something more specific?
Absolutely. Talk about like your earliest like queer memories.
Oh, you actually unlocked a deeply repressed memory.
Let's go. Let's go.
Oh my God. I don't know if I want to talk about this.
It's okay. Okay, that's the teaser. There we go. Cliffhanger. You'll have to watch Lyndsey's episode.
Oh my God. Andrea.
Lyndsey Conway.
What are some of the difficulties of recording in such a small space?
Well, one part of it is like the fact that we're in a camper, which has a lot of metal and not a lot of, like, there's no rugs or anything like that. So
Not yet. Just you wait, it's going to get cold.
Gotcha. But like the audio tends to like bounce around a bit. I know some people said like, hey, put up like a lot of like blankets and like you can actually like treat the space for audio.
We have a lot of curtains hanging up.
We do. Really, it's just like how small it is.
Yeah, like the logistics of bodies.
Yeah, it's
getting
the
around
logistic
each
of
other
bodies. It's the logistic
trying to get the shot when we can't back the
we
camera
can't
up anymore.
I know, unless we want to get a new lens. Like, I mean, like it's crazy. Yeah, so we can't back the camera up anymore. And yeah, it's just like trying to make do with the limited amount of space that we have. Where do the cords go? The guests are going to trip over things. Where do I sit?
Where do you sit when we are recording?
Oh, when we're recording, I'm literally right here. I'm right behind the guest. You can see it in Chelsea's episode because Chelsea will turn because I'm laughing to what she's saying, like literally right behind her head. Oh my God. Like it's right behind her head and I'm like chuckling at what she's saying and she turned around a couple times so you know that I'm sitting literally right here.
So cute.
Yeah. I love it. It's great.
What's your favorite cocktail that we've had so far?
This one.
This is for you. Great.
What is this one? Do you want to talk about what's in it?
Yeah. So you wanted a riff on a cocktail from an arcade bar that was Revenge of the Nerds. So we made a nerd gummy infused spirit. I think we used vodka. We made our own sour mix with lemon juice and lime juice. We did a hibiscus tea syrup. So I wanted to make it really sweet, but also really sour. And then we topped it with a little bubbles,
it's so
seltzer,
good.
And a little salt because we season everything.
We do. I wish you guys could taste this because it's so delicious.
I'm so glad.
And they're a little like, I guess they don't make Nerds Rope anymore. You know what? I just remembered a dream I had. Nerds Rope was in my dream last night.
Oh my gosh.
I really miss Nerds Rope.
We'll find one for you.
Now they only have like the little bits and pieces. Yeah, but you just want like a whole rope. So, Lyndsey Conway, my beautiful girlfriend. How did you come up with the name Crying While Driving?
Well, I came up with it having a meltdown on my way to your house over the summer. And I knew that I wanted to do some kind of project like what we're doing. I just couldn't land on a name. And Crying While Driving, it just made sense. It's relatable. It's kind of funny. I think everybody does it. The car has always been a really safe space for me to process emotions. And here we are, Crying While Driving.
Yeah. It's such a funny name. Do you get like, what are people's responses? What are people's responses?
The response that I've mainly got are laughs and like, oh yeah, that's relatable. I do that all the time. Like, great. Yeah, we all do.
Yeah. Yeah. The car is a very like safe space. Why do you think that is? Is it just because like we're alone in like a confined little area?
Yeah, I think so. I bought my first car at 16 for $200, and that was my only thing, that I owned for a long time. And if when you're younger, you first get into college, you have roommates, like you're not really alone ever unless you're in the car.
Yeah.
So.
That's very true. Sorry. What can we look forward to?
We have been so lucky at the stories that people have been sharing. We're so lucky that people, one, want to come on, two, want to share their story with us and with the internet and the world. I think what you can look forward to is authenticity. We're going to talk about chosen family and compet and first times, and the sky's the limit. Nothing is off limits unless our guest says so.
Yeah, that's very true. So what are we doing? Let's wait for Sadie to stop drinking. French bulldogs.
You're so pretty.
You're pretty.
You're great at this. You're so relaxed and well-spoken.
I've had to repeat myself multiple times. Okay, I was going to ask you something important. Oh. What are we doing to make sure that our guests are comfortable with the episodes?
Well, we're giving them final cut, of course. We want to make people comfortable in the space, so we're having conversations ahead of time if anything's off limits. If somebody is sober or not, we're catering as best we can to the person in the hot seat.
Yeah. I'm in the hot seat today. I'm feeling it. Cool. Well, this has been a really awesome project, and you're so brave.
You're so brave.
Being here every episode. I mean, you're in the hot seat. You're the host.
I'm not in the hot seat.
You are,
I
though.
am afraid for you to put me in the hot seat at some point. No, it's really I'd rather be on this side of things where we're just steering the conversation. We've been so lucky that people have been vulnerable and honest and willing to share their story.
Yeah. Very much looking forward to our next episode.
I'm looking forward to you coming on for a full episode.
I'm scared. All right. Anything else?
You're so pretty.
You're pretty. Anything else, my love?
I don't know.
All right. Let's cut.
Crying while driving, oh, what a day. Crying while driving, you're on your way. Oh, crying while driving.
Yeah, hi, I'm gay.